Okay, so for the body portraits, if you go to the PS Learning page, I do have all of the requirements written right here for you guys to find. This information is also in your binder. So if you get a little bit confused or lost, this sheet is in the binder. So I mentioned earlier that your body portrait number 1 is going to be your body in a filtered environment. So an example of that would be these first couple. So this is an example of body portrait number 1. It's simply your body in an environment that has a filter applied to it. Same thing with this second portrait. A good example of your body plus a filtered environment. All we really need to do is lasso you out of the hallway, insert you into a background. We need to apply a shadow so that you look pretty realistic. And then we're going to apply a filter. Pretty easy. So the first thing that you guys need to do is find a environment for yourself. So I brought up a Google search. I don't know why. I just picked a lunchroom. It's really important that everybody goes to tools and you change the size to large because we are going to be printing these on a full sheet of paper. So we're not going to be printing them at 40% like we did for the Warhol portraits. We're going to be printing them a full 11 by 8.5. So if these pictures are pixelated or kind of junky looking, it's going to show up in your printout. So this is a personal preference. So pick, whatever environment looks good to you. So, maybe you want to pick this space here. You are going to right click and copy the image, just like we did for the Warhol portraits. And we're going to bring up Photoshop. And I'm going to make a new document because I already have my Warhols here from printing. And these you can just label body. Oh gosh, I can't type today. Body portrait 1. Make sure, like right now, my settings are stuck on pixel. So I'm going to make sure that I am printing in inches. So if I go back to my image of this lunchroom is wider than it is tall. So I'm going to have to do my orientation 11 for the width, 8.5 for the height. If your image is taller than it is wide, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to do 8.5 for the width and 11 for the height. Make sure your resolution is at 300 pixels per inch, and you can go ahead and hit create. Normally, on most things, you would be able to right click and paste, but Photoshop doesn't let you do that. But you can go to edit and paste. And I've got my lunchroom in here, and you can see it is layer 1. Mine pasted perfectly in here, but if yours didn't, you can hit Control T, which is short for transform, and you'll be able to make your image larger or smaller. It is important that you guys take up all of the space. So if your image is like a panoramic, you're going to have to make it larger so that it fits that piece of paper. The ultimate goal is that your environment fills the page, okay, vertical or horizontal. So I have my space in there. We're gonna be using 6 different pictures. This is just the picture for the first environment, but you're gonna do 6 different. We are gonna use the same portrait though. So right now I have my background that's blank. I have my layer 1, which is my lunchroom. Now I need to put my body in here. The easiest way to do it, I think, I haven't done this for a while. So I think if I go to File and Open, I am able to find the common folder from here. So I'm going to have to hit this up arrow next to my location. So I'm just going to go up until I can't go anymore. See how it turns that light gray color? And then I can go ahead and find the common folders because that's where your portraits are kept. PWHS. And you guys are going to scroll down to FireRizen Computer Graphics. And it's going to be the 2020 fall. So your images should be in here. You can change the view of them by going to large icon so that you can see which portrait is yours. Now, I'm not going to embarrass any of you by doing your portrait. So I'm actually going to go back to an old class and I'm going to do one of them so that I don't make anyone feel uncomfortable. Let's see, who can I put in this lunchroom? Who's doing a lunchroom pose? We'll do Isaiah. So pretend I'm Isaiah and I'm going to be standing in this lunchroom here. So I have my environment and I have my body portrait. So I need to move him into this space. So I can, there's a few ways you can do this. I can literally move him in and then erase, or I can select him here and move him in. There's really no right or wrong. Personally, I think it's easier to do the work here and then move him in when he's finished. So right now he is a background layer. So I'm going to click the little lock to unlock him so that I can edit him. So we're going to use the selection tools. So the third one down, actually, no, I'm going to go the fourth one down and I'm going to choose the quick selection tool. It should look like a paintbrush with a little oval that has dots around it. So when I click on the quick selection tool, it says that it makes a selection by finding and following the edges of an image. So Photoshop knows colored pixels. So part of the reason I picked Isaiah is his hair and his clothing is dark. So he's going to be easier to lasso out than somebody that's wearing clothing that kind of matches that gray wall. So if you're wearing like a white or a gray shirt, I apologize. Your job is going to be a little bit harder. The only areas I will have trouble with are the pants where it matches up with that dark gray background here. So using my quick selection tool, and my layer is unlocked. I'm going to start clicking and drawing over Isaiah. Notice how it immediately started picking up on the outer edge of his hair. So see that? It's pretty easy. So all I need to do is click and I need to just drag over his body. Okay, see how it's just snapping on? It's almost perfect. But look what happens down here by the feet. It didn't quite catch. I'm going to zoom really far in so you guys can see this. It didn't quite catch the white of his shoes. So I'm going to have to go to my quick selection tool and I'm going to have to add that information in. Now, the quick selection tool isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn close to perfect. So notice how my quick selection tool has a little plus sign on the inside. The quick selection naturally adds things to the selection, but if I accidentally whoa, I selected this part of the floor, if I hold Alt, which is a shortcut for the minus, I can click on this background and I can start kind of scrubbing it away from my selection. So just by holding Alt, it changes to a minus sign. I'm zoomed in, so if I use my space bar, I can zip around this image really easily. So I can go ahead and get this other part of Isaiah's shoe. And notice how it grabbed this little shadow. I'm going to hold Alt and I'm going to get rid of this. Now, some people are really good at selecting and some people, this is a little trickier. I'm not going to lie. I've done this a lot in my life. So I kind of know how the quick selection tool works. So if this looks like it's pretty easy, it's because I've done this a lot. You may struggle a little bit with it. All I'm doing is holding spacebar and I'm just moving around this image just to make sure that everything looks good. If I want, I can add in this string and I can use my eraser tool later and I can erase this inside part. I'm just going to leave it for now. And the hair looks pretty good. I could maybe add a little bit more of it where the curl kind of starts getting lost in the background. I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of the hair to that. Every picture is different. Every person is different. So whatever Photoshop picks up on, you're going to have to kind of figure out. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to double click my hand tool to bring it back. So the ultimate goal, people, is to get, those are called marching ants. That's your selection. All right, so now that I have Isaiah here, I just need to move him into his environment. So I'm going to go ahead and use the move tool. The move tool changes to a little scissors here, which gives me the idea that I'm going to be cutting this out. So I'm going to click on Isaiah. And I'm going to take him and I'm going to hover over my body portrait 1 and it's going to open up. I'm still holding down my mouse and the little plus sign appears and I can drop Isaiah in here. I'm going to keep him zoomed in so that I can use my eraser tool to clean up any of the ghosting of the edges here. You can see around his shoes and his... Okay, so I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to start erasing part of Isaiah. To move around my image, I'm just holding the space bar. So up in your options panel, you can change the size of your eraser. You can make it big. You can make it smaller. You can also change the hardness. So I just want to show you 100% hardness looks like this. Like it's a sharp eraser, right? But if I change it to like 14%, see how that's now a soft eraser? So you want to kind of pay attention to the hardness of your eraser. So I'm kind of go in between. I'm going to do 42%. And I'm just going to kind of like gently scrub up against, whoops, a little too much. So Control Z. I'm using my mouse. That's a problem instead of using the stylus. I'm too lazy to open my drawer and get the stylus out. So I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to kind of erase anything that looks a little bit like out of place or like it isn't going to look good when I make Isaiah smaller. So trying to get rid of that ghosting effect that happened around his hair where that background showed up. The other area that you want to pay attention to, the shoes. Okay, it looks kind of scraggly right here. So I'm going to use my eraser and I'm just going to kind of clean those up a little bit before I make him a little bit smaller. You really want to take some time and make sure your image looks good because this is what the main focus of it. Like you're going to be graded on how well your body blends into this background. If you have this weird ghosting effect that the hallway is starting to show through in your image, it's not a good look. Okay, so that looks pretty clean, looks pretty good. His jacket came over here really nicely with no ghosting. So I need to make him smaller, Control T. And I'm gonna just try to fit him in this space. So in relation to the size of these chairs, I'm gonna have to, like if he's sitting in this chair, he'd, maybe be a little bit smaller, like this size-ish, let's say. Okay, so Isaiah's in this space. Yay, we're done, awesome. Okay, number 2 dead giveaway that something is photoshopped. He kind of appears to be floating in this room. There's no shadow or highlight or anything that makes him look like he's grounded in this space. Notice how there's some shadows going on with a lot of the furniture in this room. I'm going to have to apply a shadow to make Isaiah look like he belongs. There's 2 ways you can do a shadow. The first way is using the burn tool. So it is right here. Normally you would see the dodge tool. It looks like a lollipop. If you right click on it, the little hand is the burn tool. What the burn tool does is it darkens an area. So we are going to be darkening layer 1, which is the floor underneath Isaiah's feet. So right now my burn tool is 168 pixels. The hardness is 0%. You want that hardness to be 0. Right now my exposure is 36%. And I'm just going to click underneath Isaiah's feet. And notice the more I click, I'm just going to do this quite a bit here, the darker that burn gets, right? Now, okay, that's a little bit too intense for these shadows. So I'm going to Control Z that. And I'm just going to kind of try to make this shadow blend in with the shadows behind it. And you can change to highlights, shadows, midtones. And I'm just burning the highlights a little bit. So just kind of making it look like he is grounded in this space. So that's one way to make a shadow. I'm burning the background. Another way to make a shadow is creating a new layer, putting that layer underneath Isaiah's feet, and I can use the paintbrush tool. So right now I've got this soft brush. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. The hardness is at 0. My opacity is at 22%. I can even, let's say I sample kind of this shadow color, this tan color, and I can go ahead and I can draw underneath Isaiah's feet. So if I hide this, you can see that shadow that I just drew. It's really faint, but you want to match the shadow to the environment. Okay, so that's another way you can make a shadow. If you have a white background, the burn tool doesn't work. The burn tool doesn't burn white. So you would have to do it the second way by creating the new layer. Okay, so we're almost done. We have our person put in. The edges look really good. We have a shadow. It looks semi-believable. Like just glancing at this, you wouldn't necessarily know this was photoshopped. The last step for portrait number 1 is applying a filter, okay? So this goes back to the Warhol portraits. You guys get to pick the filter. It could be a subtle filter. It could be an extreme filter. Remember, your colors are going to come from here. So maybe I want to do this kind of yellow color paired with, I don't know, a purple because they're complementary colors. How about that? We'll do this like yellow and purple for our filter. So I'm just going to start with my layer 1, my background. Because these layers are separate, I'm going to have to apply this filter 2 times. Once to layer 1 and once to layer 2, which is Isaiah. I'm just going to temporarily get rid of this extra layer that I did the brush tool shadow in because I don't really need it for this particular image. So filter gallery, and I'm going to hit the minus sign to bring this into view. So right now I'm working with the stamp filter and it's pretty intense, like, you know. So I can change these scales over here. I can totally change the filter to something else. Or I could even pick, you know, like an artistic filter where it's not super intense, like changing the colors. You guys get to decide it. It's your picture. You get to decide what kind of filter you want to do. I'm going to go with the chalk and charcoal filter. So I'm going to apply this one. And then the last thing I need to do is I need to apply that filter to Isaiah. So I'm going to go to layer 2 and I'm going to go to filter gallery, hit the minus sign, and I'm going to apply the same filter. Now here's the cool thing is I don't have to necessarily keep these scales the same for him. I can change these scales. So maybe because his clothing is really dark, maybe I want to lower these to get a little bit more of that green to show through. I can do that. Okay, there we go. So this right here could be my body portrait number 1. So these 2 layers together, Isaiah, background, filtered, shadow, looks pretty good. I can go ahead and file save as. One last thing, because we opened this portrait from the common folder, it's going to try to save in the common folder. Do not let this happen. Students' work can never save in the common folder. There's like a setting where it doesn't work. So for this particular project, you have to make sure you hit that up arrow. We kind of got a little spoiled with the Warhol portraits because once we saved it in that spot, it saved it in the same spot every time. These ones, you have to make sure you're saving in my folder. That's the number one thing that people do wrong with the body portraits is they accidentally try saving in the common folder and they lose their work. So make sure you're saving in my folder. For me, I'm saving in computer graphics. And I'm going to change the name because I already have a one from yesterday and save it. Okay, so body portrait 1. You guys get to come up with the environment. You get to pick the filter. That is it. So